Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like.
Yeah, leave your comments and also check out the podcast below in the description.
All right, John. Carson Wentz got traded to the Indianapolis Colts from the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm trying to hit all the words in the YouTube algorithm. A third-round pick and a conditional second. It becomes a first if he plays either 75% of the team snaps or 70% of the Colts snaps, and Nick Foles leads the Colts to the playoffs after a late season acquisition from the Bears. So what was your first reaction when this trade happened?
Would that be Carson's worst nightmare if Foles
Without
became his
question.
backup? Frank's just like, hey, man, just getting the band back together.
It's like, no, I hated that band.
I guess the first reaction was it's hard to be shocked when something's been out there for it feels like 6 months. Maybe it's been a month of legit trade talk or when it became real. I guess it was inevitable that it was going to be the Colts or the Bears. The first thing I think you look at is how much they paid for it. And you just go, clearly his market for a player that is making a ton of money, that was viewed as a true franchise quarterback, talent, guy that could just be a stalwart in the league for 15 years, kind of like, you had texted me the 2017 highlights of when he almost won the MVP. And what I think he was is kind of like the modern day Big Ben, because he was a little faster, maybe a little skinnier, but just that style of like throwing guys off him and making these. You just had like, this isn't just going to work. This guy's going to dominate, and it's just a lesson
in physical pocket quarterback, like physical in the pocket, rare.
Yeah, and one of the parallels you'd say to Ben too. I mean, he played at a much smaller school than even Miami of Ohio's Division I. I mean, he played in D1 AA. That I think sometimes when a guy comes from a school like, it's hard to fathom, like, wait, this guy fucking played at North Dakota State? I mean, you and me, we watched Pac-12 schools, Jim Harbaugh's of the world. I mean, I could name you 100 colleges that would die for a talent like that. It just shows you. But it also, for as fast as you can kind of feel like you're at the mountaintop, he plummeted, Guy. And his career derailed. And now it's, I think the Colts believe that they're just going to take a risky swing, but not mortgage everything, right? I think that's just what it kind of says. They're giving a third this year. So they're just out of pocket this year, a third-round pick. That means they still have their first-round pick and their second-round pick. I think they're going to look at it like, if we can fix this guy, we're going to have their GM hits on a lot of picks. I can get two really good players to go with our already really good roster. And if we can just resurrect this guy's career, we're going to be fucking good this year, right?
Yeah, and I would say this. I think it's pretty likely that they end up giving, I love that word when it comes to trades, their first-round pick. I've never conveyed anybody $5 for a Gatorade, but you're always conveying picks. I think it's likely, right? Because I think, and I don't think it guarantees.
Did you
that
see
he's
what
good.
the stipulation was? It was like 60% of the snaps.
75% of the snaps or 70% of the snaps, and they make the playoffs. I'm pretty sure that those are the stipulations.
Gotcha.
So it's possible.
So if they just make the playoffs, they're in, or he's got a 70% of the snaps.
If he plays 70% of the snaps and they make the playoffs, or if he just plays 3/4 of the snaps.
So if Nick Foles plays 8 of the games, then they'd be in trouble.
I think it's pretty likely they end up giving up that first pick. Now, it's not a guarantee, right? Because this guy has dealt with injuries. But I think if you told me the Eagles get the Colts' first pick, I would say, yeah, that's expected. It doesn't necessarily mean he's played really well. I think there's a big question, right, about how much he plays. That's one of them. Then there's just the question of, does he play well? They don't have any. They're not benching him for Jalen Hurts, right? Jacob Eason is not coming in to take over. You don't do this deal and then 6 games in go, oh, he's not good enough, we'll move on. Like, you're kind of in this for this is a project you're diving into, and the hope is that it'll look better early. But I think the first hope they have is that he's just healthy enough to play 75% of the snaps, because that's been a major issue for him. I'm with you. I think it's pretty low risk for them. I mean, they take on the money, but they're not – like the Niners would have had to move off of Jimmy Garoppolo to acquire Carson Wentz. The Colts didn't have to do any of that.
I think the pressure now is on the player. I think we look at the Colts and we go, they're well run, they're well coached, they have a ton of good players on every side of the ball. They have a good identity of like – they nailed – I mean, Jonathan Taylor is someone that put him in a lot of DraftKings lineups the second half of the season. That guy, every week he looked up, it was like 100-plus yards, and he just looked awesome. We're big fans of Michael Pittman. They draft well. Their defense is good. Like Carson, last year he kind of had an excuse. They had a bunch of injuries or talent, but then Jalen Hurts came in and kind of poo-pooed that. Not that they were not as talented as they were 3 years ago, but clearly they were better than what Carson was doing. But there are no excuses now on this guy. And the one thing that he gets that he didn't get in Philly is a little smaller of a market. I would say less of a pressure cooker in terms of the animosity. But the only time I've ever spent in Indy was at the Combine. But it's the one thing you realize when you go there, they call the dome, it's the dome that Peyton built. Like football is a very, very big deal there because Peyton made them not a relevant franchise, but a fucking powerhouse. And when you develop a powerhouse franchise, you create these fans that become very, very interested. You and I talk about it sometimes, like with the Warriors, right? That like you see what the Warriors, like the fans talk about and stuff. Like you can tell they're pretty invested, and that's part of just dominating. And Peyton did it. And then they kind of pulled the Packers. They went straight from Peyton to Luck, and they're like, holy shit! And they hit the lottery. And then in a weird way with the Luck situation, they hit the lottery getting Chris Ballard. Like they have just been, they went from Polian, who's in the Hall of Fame, to now Ballard. Like they're a pretty high level operation. And I just think the pressure, the animosity is not going to be there, but there are a lot of people that place sold out. Irsay's one of the richer owners because his fucking franchise is a cash cow. So it's not like there's no pressure, right? I mean, they just had Rivers, who you can say what you want, a little over the hill, but he was kind of like most people respected him a lot, even if you made fun of some of his picks. But he came there and they won, right? No issues. And Frank, they raved about him. They loved his attitude. So there is like, if you're Michael Pittman or Jonathan Taylor or Quentin Nelson or Darius Leonard, like you just saw for 6 months, Rivers, who we can debate all long if he's a Hall of Fame player. But I would probably say no, but he's a Hall of Fame like competitor, grinder, the what you want in the quarterback. That's who Carson is replacing, right? There are some, I wouldn't say big shoes, but like the guys know what it looks like now.
Yeah,
especially the younger guys.
Definitely a leader, and the time in Philadelphia, I think, is appropriate to question whether or not Carson Wentz is a leader. And Phillip Rivers was absolutely a leader.
Well, I think the compensation shows you that the Colts. To me, if he had like plus character and all this stuff, they're getting a 1.
Yeah,
the
if
Eagles.
He had plus character, he would not. Would he be getting traded right now?
No.
I mean, that's the thing. I think we're used to in baseball, like a guy having a career year and hitting 35 home runs and he doesn't do it again. Like historically, that's been kind of a career year. It's kind of a baseball thing. A career year for quarterbacks happens, but not. I mean, usually if you're a pretty good quarterback, you're just a pretty good quarterback.
It's rare, like, in 1997, I threw 35 touchdowns, and from then on out, I was a below-average player.
Yeah, it doesn't, right?
It's too hard to do it over 16 games. And like you can just get hot in hitting in baseball and then lose your confidence or something. I think golf's a little bit like that. It's hard to like get the yips at quarterback,
which is what it felt like happened to him. Now, I'll say this. He had
a little bit.
Last year, he had a career year. His high was really high. His low last year was lower than what his average was, right? To be a 57% passer, that's a significant drop from 64% the year before. 15 interceptions in 12 games. He had 7 picks in 16 games the year before. So I do think, and I'm guilty of this too, we talk about him like he had that one great year.
Irony is he beat the Niners.
That's
a great throw.
Yeah. Well, but I think to that point, like we talk about him like he had that one great year, but he's been a dog ever since. And we let maybe kind of the way we talk about the whole persona and is he a leader? Is he shy away from competition, which is a poor trait, kind of leak into the fact that the year he just had was significantly worse than any year he's had since 17, right? It was significant. He looked significantly worse. I mean, the 3 years before 15, it's hard because here's the other thing. He doesn't play 16 games, which is another part of the criticism of him, right? He's done it
Did he play 16? Do you have his game logs up?
Yeah.
Did he start all 6 games as a rookie?
He did.
And then his second year, that was 16. And then 17 is when he was going to win the MVP and he tears his ACL.
Yep.
The next year, he had the back issue right at the end of the season. Foles comes in. They win another playoff game.
Played only 11 games that year.
Then the next year is That's 2019, right?
Plays a full season.
Plays a full season and actually is really good down the stretch. Remember, they make the playoffs and gets a concussion, right, in the playoff game against Seattle. So he doesn't, remember McCown comes in. And last year, he doesn't play 16 games, but he had I think it's fair to say if they hadn't benched him, he was on pace to play 16 games, right? He hadn't limped off the field all season long. He was just playing really shitty, which I would say would be a positive if you were looking at the stipulations for him playing, because that would be a concern. And I think the concern bear out on them putting the playtime percentages. If I trade for Deshaun Watson, there's no playtime percentages, right? I trade for Russell Wilson or Derek Carr, no playtime percentage. I think with guys like Jimmy Garoppolo, this guy, injuries are part of their story beside anything on the field, talent-wise, or leadership stuff off the field, right?
Yeah.
Can this guy play 16 games? And I think the last 2 years, he showed that, I don't know if he's overcome it, but he's durable. Because I give the concussion thing a little bit of a randomness, and last year, but then it's
Once
weird.
Once you start getting concussions.
He's got so many variables, guy. He's got is he a leader? But is he a shitty player? Why do we got to pay him all this money? He is it's one of the more complicated NFL trades I remember in recent memory. I think we see this a lot in the NBA. Guy makes a ton of money. Could he get it back? He's not playing as well? He's kind of a character issue. It happens all the time because they're kind of divas. It's rare with a quarterback who I think we thought was going to be a Hall of Famer to then throw kind of huge diva potential.
Yeah.
It's not quite Antonio Brown or anything, but it does have some similarities to some of the shit we've seen over the years with the position players.
Yeah, I mean, the question is Carson Wentz going to be on the Colts for the next 12 years, or is he going to be on 3 teams in the next 12 years?
If I said Guy Haberman, $1,000 right now. Carson Wentz, Colt, 2.5 years over under.
Over. I think he's going to be good enough. I don't know if he's going to be great again, but I think he's going to be good enough. I think he's going to be better than he was last year. You and I talked about it. He threw some passes this year that were I always go back to he threw this interception in the end zone against the Bears that was just an idiot, just an awful. I shouldn't say idiotic. It's just an awful decision. I won't say idiotic unless I've run around and tried to play quarterback in the NFL. But it was an awful decision at an
relative
awful time
to other quarterbacks in the NFL. Idiotic.
It was just awful, and it happened repeatedly.
He was terrible this year. I think it's fair to say he was the worst starting quarterback of the consistent starting quarterbacks this year.
But given what they gave up for him, John, they don't need him to be an MVP candidate to make this value worth it, right? You don't get MVP quarterbacks for a third, and I'll even say a first. Let's just say it becomes a first. MVP quarterbacks don't get traded for that. Solid starters get traded for that.
They really just need him in a weird way to be a game manager, maybe a little better at times. That is something he struggles with. Because I would say when I think Carson, I think a little bit of hero ball.
That's true. Yeah. But that's where the Colts are such a unique spot because they have this coach that was there when he was good.
Yeah. Frank can kind of
pass Doug Peterson.
Legend status, but he can become a coach that I don't think we quite talk about right now with the elite offensive guy. If all of a sudden they are competing for the 1 seed and Wentz is balling, his stock skyrockets. And the Eagles are going to take a lot of shit.
I think, until they nail whatever pick they get from the Colts, they should be taking shit for this whole situation. Because I think the one thing, if you wanted to defend Carson, which you and I don't do a ton of lately, is it's not as if the Eagles have operated. The Colts have now shown for a few years they are in a stable place. The Eagles have been kind of erratic as an organization, right?
Yes.
So that's not an ideal situation for a player who is not in total control of an organization, whose play doesn't elevate him to the top of the pyramid, whose leadership qualities do not make him the unquestioned leader. So it's everybody's responsible, but you would not say it was the best incubator for him.
If I would have told you week 1, we're just headed into week 1, 2020, that when the season ends, Doug Peterson will be fired and Carson Wentz will be traded, you would have been does a meteor hit the fucking the link and they can't play for a year?
Why would
and
they
just
both
need
be gone?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Especially, I think even now, we look back when Carson got traded, it was bound to happen. Until Goff got traded, this didn't really feel like a real possibility. Even though it probably was cooking, right?
Pretty nuts they were both in the same draft, 1-2.
It's wild.
They were back-to-back years, guy. Jameis, Mariota, Goff, Wentz, all different teams. Not ideal 1-2-1-2.
No, but we'll go into this draft believing all the guys are going to be career stars and Hall of Fame.
Do that with every draft.